Pillar 3. Recap Behavioral Science Analysis. At the bar at the Griffin's Head Inn, post-trial discussion. Host, Samara X. Guest, Dr. Elena Vasquez, behavioral science expert.
Welcome back to the Post-Trial Podcast. I'm Samara X, coming to you live from the Griffin's Head Inn after what might be the most complex evening of testimony we've witnessed yet. Rejoining me is Dr. Elena Vasquez, Professor of Behavioral Science at Cambridge. Elena, Pillar 3, Deeds, just delivered some fascinating contradictions.
Samara, I have to say, watching Claude's systematic evaluation of Bacon's actual behaviors versus his stated principles was like watching a masterclass in behavioral analysis. But the results, they're troubling in ways that I think Claude's methodology couldn't fully capture.
Let's dive right into question 9, consistent behavior across contexts. Claude denied Bacon the point, citing evidence of opportunistic adaptation to different political audiences. You were shaking your head during that exchange.
This is where I think Claude made a critical error in behavioral interpretation. Yes, Bacon's political behaviors varied across contexts, but Claude missed the crucial distinction between adaptive leadership and character inconsistency. There's a landmark study by Goldman and Boyatzis on adaptive leadership published in Harvard Business Review that shows authentic leaders must modulate their approach based on context while maintaining core values. Bacon's defense about serving Elizabeth versus James differently. That's textbook adaptive leadership, not character weakness.
But Claude found substantial evidence of betrayal. The Essex prosecution, accepting bribes, abandoning relationships when convenient.
And this is where our current political moment makes Bacon's behavior so relevant. Look at leaders today who maintain rigid consistency regardless of context. They're often the most ineffective. Bacon faced what political scientists call the authenticity trap. Damned if you adapt, damned if you don't. The Essex prosecution is a perfect example. Research by Max Weber on moral responsibility shows there's a difference between ethics of conviction versus ethics of responsibility. Bacon chose responsibility, prosecuting actual treason despite personal cost. How many of today's leaders would have that courage?
Claude also cited contemporary accounts of opportunistic behavior. Doesn't that suggest genuine character flaws?
Samara, this is crucial. Whose contemporary accounts? Political enemies who benefited from destroying his reputation. There's extensive research in social psychology about fundamental attribution error. We judge others by their actions, but ourselves by our intentions. Bacon's enemies judged his tactical adaptations as character flaws while ignoring his consistent intellectual mission. And frankly, we need more leaders today who can navigate complex systems while maintaining authentic core purpose. Bacon's willingness to appear inauthentic to preserve authentic work. That's sophisticated moral reasoning.
Question 10 got even more complex. Consistent messaging across audiences. Claude again denied the point, saying Bacon told different audiences what they wanted to hear.
This is where Claude's analysis was most incomplete. There's crucial research by Brené Brown on authentic communication that distinguishes between manipulation and translation. When you have a complex truth to communicate, you must translate it into language your audience can receive.
Bacon's defense about explaining his craft differently to children versus fellow bakers. That's not deception, that's pedagogical wisdom. The core message remained consistent. Advance empirical methodology. Serve justice. Preserve truth. The delivery varied because effective communication requires meeting audiences where they are. But surely there's a line between adaptation and deception?
Absolutely. And here's where Bacon's behavior becomes a crucial case study for today's leaders. Research by Amy Edmondson at Harvard shows that psychological safety requires leaders who can communicate hard truths in accessible ways. Bacon's parliamentary speeches across different reigns weren't opportunistic. They were strategic communication of consistent values through contextually appropriate methods. Compare that to today's political leaders, who either rigidly repeat identical talking points or completely change their message for different audiences. Bacon found a third way: consistent core message with adaptive delivery.
Now, question 11 was fascinating. Claude awarded Bacon the point for authentic value creation, citing his centuries of scientific contribution. You seemed relieved by that verdict.
Finally, this is where Claude's methodology captured something profound. There's extensive research in organizational psychology about legacy thinking versus transactional thinking. Bacon's entire approach was legacy-oriented, creating value that would compound across generations. The Jefferson quote Claude cited: Bacon, Locke, and Newton, three greatest men. That's not just historical opinion. Recent studies in innovation research show that Bacon's scientific methodology forms the foundation of our entire modern approach to knowledge creation. 4 centuries later, we're still using his frameworks.
But Claude also noted his political success was built on manipulation and corruption.
And here's where I think we need to apply what behavioral economists call systems thinking. Bacon operated in a systematically corrupt environment. Research by Transparency International shows that in highly corrupt systems, sometimes the only way to create authentic value is through tactical engagement with corruption. The crucial question isn't whether he engaged with corrupt systems, it's whether that engagement served authentic value creation or personal enrichment. Claude's evidence clearly shows the former. Those bribes funded intellectual development that revolutionized human understanding.
Question 12. Growth and learning capacity. Claude awarded the point, noting 40 years of intellectual development. You were quite emotional during Bacon's response.
Samara, this is where Bacon's example becomes most crucial for today's leaders. There's groundbreaking research by Carol Dweck on growth mindset that shows authentic leaders are defined not by perfection, but by capacity for learning and evolution. Bacon demonstrated what psychologists call domain-specific growth, extraordinary development in his core competency, while maintaining tactical patterns in peripheral domains. That's not character weakness. That's strategic focus on where growth could create maximum value.
The jury seemed deeply moved by his 40 years of continuous improvement.
Of course they were. They recognized something we desperately need in today's leadership: genuine commitment to craft over 4 decades. Research by Malcolm Gladwell and Anders Ericsson on deliberate practice shows this level of sustained improvement requires extraordinary authentic motivation. Think about our current leaders who change positions based on polling data versus someone who spent 40 years refining methodologies for truth-seeking. The contrast is stark.
Overall, Claude scored Pillar 3 as 2 out of 4, mixed authenticity in actions. Do you agree with that assessment?
I think Claude's methodology was sound, but his interpretation was incomplete. Based on behavioral research, I'd argue Bacon demonstrated strategic authenticity, authentic in domains where he could create maximum value, tactical in domains where adaptation was necessary for mission preservation. Studies in moral psychology by Jonathan Haidt show that moral reasoning becomes more complex in corrupt environments. Bacon's behavior patterns suggest someone navigating that complexity while maintaining authentic core purpose.
What concerns you most about Claude's analysis?
My concern is that systematic analysis, while valuable, might miss the contextual intelligence required to evaluate leadership in corrupt systems. There's important research by James McGregor Burns on transformational leadership that shows authentic leaders often appear inauthentic to those who can't see the larger transformation they're enabling. Bacon transformed human knowledge while appearing politically opportunistic. Today we judge his political tactics harshly while benefiting from his intellectual legacy. That disconnect suggests our evaluation methods might be missing something crucial.
Why is Bacon's example particularly relevant for today's leaders?
Because we're facing the same fundamental challenge Bacon faced. How do you maintain authentic purpose in systemically corrupt environments? Research by Transparency International shows corruption levels globally are approaching crisis levels. We need leaders who can navigate these systems without being corrupted by them. Bacon's model, authentic in your core mission, tactical in your peripheral engagement, might be the only viable approach for creating lasting change in broken systems.
Any final thoughts on what Pillar 4, humility, might reveal?
If my analysis is correct, if Bacon truly represents strategic authenticity, then Pillar 4 should reveal someone with genuine self-awareness about his tactical compromises, coupled with appropriate confidence in his authentic contributions. Research by Jim Collins on Level 5 leadership suggests this combination of personal humility with professional will is the hallmark of transformational leaders. The question is whether Claude's methodology can distinguish between humility and self-doubt, confidence and arrogance. Those distinctions require emotional intelligence that systematic analysis might miss.
Dr. Elena Vasquez, thank you for another penetrating analysis. Tomorrow we conclude with Pillar 4. I'm Samara X, and this has been the Post-Trial Podcast.
Thank you, Samara. Watching systematic methodology grapple with the complexities of authentic leadership in corrupt systems, it's exactly the kind of analysis our current moment demands.
And remember, sometimes the leaders who appear most compromised are the ones creating the most authentic change. The question is whether we have the wisdom to tell the difference.
No one knows what it's like to be the bad man, to be the sad man behind the lines. No one knows what it's like to be hated, to be faded, to telling only lies. But my